Go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our WDCSITE February virtual meeting. My name is Song Hong, and I'll be the host of today's session. You're in the second session of the 2022 Project of the Year Awards candidate presentation. Today, we will have two presentations, and this meeting will run from 12 to 1 p.m. For those who were not able to join our first session yesterday, I'm gonna go through the housekeeping items real quick. This meeting is being recorded, and all attendees will be muted during the presentation session. And we will have 5-minute Q&A session at the end of each presentation. So please type in your questions during the presentation. We're gonna go through them at the end. 1.5 PDH credit will be provided to the attendees. The instructions for the PDH will be sent out after the event today. All right, I'm gonna jump right into our first presentation today. I am pleased to introduce our speakers. For our first presentation, we have two speakers, Othman and Sonela. Othman Chebli is a transportation engineer with over a decade of experience in multimodal planning and engineering. In his current role, leading the design and construction branch within the project delivery administration at DDOT, Othman manages a range of programs, including leading the delivery of the Bus Priority Program, the Protected Bike Lanes Program, and DC's annual Safety Improvement Program. By focusing his efforts in accelerated project delivery, he has contributed to dozens of major street redesign projects, touching all 8 wards of districts. During the last decade at DDOT and prior to his current role, Othman worked as a civil engineer on the project development and environment team, where he developed a passion for the NEPA process in context-sensitive planning and design. As a member of the drainage and hydraulics team, Othman led several stormwater improvement projects across the district. And our second speaker, Sonela, Ardekani is a senior transportation engineer with the District Department of Transportation. She has 8 years of experience in planning, design, and construction of civil and transportation engineering projects. Sonela holds a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of Maryland. She's a registered civil engineer in DC and Maryland. Sonela manages corridor-long multimodal projects in the DC. Her experience is focused on planning, design, and construction of incorporating features to improve safety for all modes of transportation consistent with DDOT's Vision Zero initiative, improve bus travel speeds and reliability, expands the network of protected bike lanes throughout the districts. She is also participates in plan review and traffic analysis review. Othman and Sonela will present on the Virginia Avenue Northwest protected bike lanes. Please join me welcoming Othman and Sonela.
Thank you. I can share my screen now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Othman Chebli, and I am very, very excited to be here today to talk about Virginia Avenue bike lane that DDOT has completed last year. As in the introduction said, I manage the design and construction branch within TESD at DDOT, and today, together with Sonela, we're going to present the PBL projects at Virginia Avenue that we completed. But before that, I wanted to briefly give you a little overview of how DDOT makes these decisions and how it ties into our mission and what helps our decision making. So the first thing that we always go bit with is the moveDC plan. moveDC is, I think most of you are familiar with it, but it is DDOT's long-range transportation plan. It sets a framework of 7 goals that reflect DC's commitment to address structure injustices and inequities while delivering excellent transportation facilities and systems in DC. The goals, as you can see, are equity, safety, mobility, product delivery, management and operations, sustainability, and enjoyable spaces. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I think most of you are very familiar with it. Our next decision maker is Vision Zero, and DDOT just released a couple months ago the 2022 update. And this one basically outlines a data-driven approach to address the issues facing our communities. And it's been a big DDOT goal to slowly go towards Vision Zero. And now to our projects. DDOT aims to ensure safety for all users, reduce CO2 emissions, and decrease single occupancy vehicles usage while increasing the trips by transit, walking, or biking to 75% by 2032. And since 2001, DDOT has built over 100 miles of bike lanes, 30 miles of which have been or are completely protected bike lanes. And over the next few years, we would like to further connect and strengthen our network by doing at least 5 miles of PBLs annually. So how are we going to be able to do this? DDOT has been focusing a lot on the small to medium scale projects. Are really the main team that does that at TSD. In 2017, when TSD was formed, the main focus was really to be responsible for traffic signals around the city. However, starting in 2018, and with the department's focus shifting to programs including PBL, bus priority program, livability studies, and others, TSD has shifted its focus to small and medium scale projects. These small and medium scale projects are usually built within the existing curb to curb. We look at repurposed and spare vehicular capacity. We don't do them in the typical transportation project delivery method, which is having a complete street, like most of our DDOT projects are. Here, we usually try to avoid or minimize impacts to utility and drainage, speed up our environmental review process and traffic analysis, and make sure that the project starts and is completely done within 18 months, and that the cost is usually around $2 million or less. We're doing one currently on Pennsylvania Avenue bus projects, which is going to be about twice that cost, but that will be by far the largest project that TSD has done. So we are able to do this thanks to our 2 IDIQ contracts. I would like to thank JMT and Mead Hunt and PSI for all the work that they've helped us with on this project. Specifically, we have JMT that helps us in the design process, and we also have an IDIQ contract for construction. Thanks to these 2 contracts, we've been able to deliver this DDOT agenda and help the agency reach the goals that were set forth by moveDC and Vision Zero. And the goal is to always be the leader nationwide in multimodal projects, as we are the capital of the country. And we know that we have an awesome opportunity to actually be working here in DC, and we're having about 18 million visitors, and everybody comes to look at and use our infrastructure. So TSD, since we started projects in 2019, corridor projects, we've been rapidly increasing our capacity. Now, on 2018, we did 1 project, and in 2022, we were able to do 12 projects, and these included Park Road and Street, Warder, Virginia Avenue, Minnesota Avenue, and in 2023, we were planning to do 14 corridor projects. And now to our projects. This project was a big milestone for DDOT, as it served to bring the city into alignment with its goal to be more multimodal friendly, reduce single occupancy vehicle trips, and meet our Vision Zero goals. This project had extensive public outreach, and as you will see through the presentation, the design was innovative in many ways, and as the standards for PBLs are still constantly evolving, this project, we hope, will serve as an example to many others that will follow in the future and be a leader in multimodal project delivery. And as you will see also when Sonela will present, this project ties several other PBLs and trails, and it converts general purpose travel lanes. Yeah, we are really excited to show you. So Sonela.
Yes, hi everyone. This is Sonela Ardekani. Glad to be here. So presenting today on Virginia Avenue Northwest. This is a timeline of the project. So the project started, initiated at least in March 2020. There was a planning time for this project, kind of like happening around summer 2020. And we chose a preferred alternative and came up with some preliminary plans during planning, sometime between summer 2020 and summer 2021, and a lot of community outreach was also done during this time. And then in summer 2021, we started the actual construction plans and final design plans, which took about, I think, about 6 months to get developed with JMT. It was like one of the first projects that the plans had to be done like very quickly, and somehow they did get done. And then construction started as soon as we finished these plans. It just was very fast paced, the whole project. So as soon as the plans were finalized in fall 2021, we started construction. Construction was supposed to last about 6 months or so. There were some, we were waiting for some materials, so it kind of like got complete 100% in fall 2022. So it lasted about 1 year. So the study area of the project, starting from the west side, I started with Rock Creek Parkway on northwest on the west, and then went all the way to the east on 18th Street Northwest. Throughout the whole corridor, there were federal, commercial, residential, and parkland use. So there were a lot of different uses that we had to accommodate for. There were numerous nearby trails that we were connecting with. And that's why this is actually, this corridor was very important in closing the gap in the regional bikeway network. Also, there were a few different recently added bike facilities, like on the bike lanes on G Street and 20 and 21st Street. Some features of the corridor, the Virginia Avenue Northwest included about 25 intersections. It included one tunnel/underpass that we had to accommodate for. There were parking restrictions throughout the corridor. There were peak period lanes and off-peak period lanes that we had to think about when we were thinking like where to position the bike lanes, either on the curb or in the middle, center running in the street. There were also tour bus parkings, depending on the part of the corridor. Also food truck parking, especially on close to the federal buildings. And there were barriers in front of federal buildings that we had to work with. We couldn't touch any of those, so we had to go around those for our facility. Another couple of things were the Watergate Hotel and the resident facilities were located in this corridor, and also the Kennedy Center were located in this corridor. So we had to work with all these different stakeholders. The lanes on the actual avenue were differed from one part of the corridor to another one. However, one thing was kind of like universal for the whole corridor. There was some access capacity that was in this corridor, so we had the opportunity to kind of like eliminate one or two lanes on like one lane on each direction to actually add the facility. During design with JMT, also we worked a lot with different manuals. The separated bike lane plan and design guide was one of them, and the bicycle facility design guide from DDOT that had just been produced from DDOT was also incorporated in this project. Here you can see some of the cross sections that they were preferred using the design the bicycle design guide. We would normally prefer to have the bike lanes at about 6 feet wide and use the buffers at about 3 feet wide, depending on how much right of way we had in the corridor. We kind of like used mostly 5 feet for the bike lanes and about 3 feet for the actual buffer. As Othman mentioned earlier, we had to remain like kind of like within the curb, the existing curb. So we had to use the right of way that we had. We couldn't like increase the right of way. Also on the operation side, we had, like looking at this table, we had to accommodate the left turns across the 2-lane bike facility, and also the right turns. But the left turns are the more crucial ones here because the threshold for crossing a 2-lane bike facility is 0. So everywhere we had a left turn that was going to be allowed after the bike facility, we had to accommodate for it. So we had to come up with a lot of signal modifications at about 8 or 9 intersections in the whole corridor. We went through the traffic analysis, and the traffic analysis actually showed for the AM peak, for PM peak, and also off peak, because we had to accommodate the Kennedy Center show times. The traffic analysis did show that most conditions were either remained the same or got slightly improved sometimes, mostly because of the signal modifications that we were going to do in the whole corridor. So we just wanted to make sure that we're not making this corridor worse by adding this facility. So I want to talk about a little bit about the key design elements here throughout the whole corridor, starting from the west side. On the west side, as I said, the Rockbrook Parkway was the western limit, which is pretty much MPS property. So we couldn't really do much on on Rockbrook Parkway, but starting from the eastern curb of Rockbrook Parkway, we kind of like we're dealing with an island that was also MPS property, and the area that we had for the sidewalk was about 12 feet. We had to work with MPS on how we would provide like a mixing zone in this area to have also the sidewalk for pedestrians and also the two-way bike facility. So we came up with 6 feet for pedestrians, 6 feet for the bikes for 2 directions. And also we used different materials on these areas. For the pedestrians, we used concrete. For the bikes, we used asphalt to kind of like differentiate in between the two. And this whole thing had to be done while maintaining access to the existing driveway entrances, because there was a gas station right next to it that we couldn't like change anything on the entrances there. Also, the entrance to the Watergate facilities that were right next to it. Another part of the corridor was the Juarez Circle and the New Hampshire Avenue part. We had to accommodate on, as you can see on these plans, on the kind of like western side, we had to accommodate the right turn, protected right turn here, and also adding the bike lanes. We needed more space, so we had to remove the median for maybe like 1/3 of the block to do that and use the space from the median as like a through lane. Also on the eastern side of these plans, you can see that we closed the slip lane coming from Kennedy Center going to Virginia Avenue. And we had to do a lot of coordination with Kennedy Center to make sure that we were not making their operations worse. And we went through additional traffic analysis for that, but that showed that it was still fine to close it. And we actually used that area to add an actual Capital Bike Share station there. At G Street was another key element, because G Street, we had to connect with the existing cycle track that had just been implemented there. And also we had our facility was going from the curb to center running. So it was like we had to accommodate for a lot of things in this intersection. We came up with the idea of the reverse L that you can see here for the bikes, connecting from the curb, going to the center running, and then also connecting to the G Street. This was one of the 2 intersections in this corridor that we had to add brand new signals, and pretty much it's G Street and the connection at E Street expressway ramp that was major work pretty much for us. Another big element here in the corridor was the tunnel, the 23rd Street tunnel. We had to keep the lanes continuing through the underpass. So we added 1 lane on each side, on each direction. We took 1 lane on each direction to do that because we needed space for the actual bike and we needed space for the buffer. In the buffer, we added the precast concrete barriers and the flexible delineators. So to make sure that the facility was going to be secure and safe for the bikes. Also, we did photometric analysis to make sure that the lighting was good in the underpass. And also we had to go through some drainage analysis to make sure that there was not going to be any pooling at the very low point of the tunnel. At 23rd Street, there was an existing RFB. We had to go through upgrades of the signing and pavement markings to make sure that they were up to date for the design manuals, and also to accommodate for the new facility that was kind of like the beginning of that underpass also. At 21st Street, we also had a major connection also again because the 21st Street had just had cycle track added to it. So we had to come up with innovative ideas here. We added, besides the actual through lanes of the bikes, we added like a Q left turn lane for the bikes, and pretty much on both directions. And also we had to accommodate for a left turn, protected left turn here on the signals. So a lot of signal modifications on the bike side and also on the vehicular side. And also at 20th Street, we noticed that there was 1 crosswalk missing on the western part of the intersection. So we wanted to add the crosswalk. We added the crosswalk. We added ADA ramps there. We added APS push buttons on both sides of the crosswalk to make it up to date. And then on 19th Street, it was the eastern terminus here. The bike lane facility was ending, so we were going to connect to the National Mall via the Constitution Avenue. There was extensive coordination work that we and JMT had to do with Mead and Hunt. Mead and Hunt was designing the crossing on the other side, kind of connecting to Constitution Avenue. So a lot of coordination work, and then we figured out that we had to make a final transition from the center running 2-way cycle track to the curb side. We wanted to keep some parking, so we had to also work with that. So a lot of design elements also involved in this intersection here too. As I said, there were major stakeholders throughout the project. One of them was the Watergate Hotel and the Watergate residences. We had to work a lot with them because they had the service lane going through almost 1/3 or 1/4 of the corridor. So we wanted to make sure that we were placing these bikes in in the best location that we could for also their residents to be able to use the facilities and to not impede their daily movements. We had a lot of public feedback. I think, here there's a lot of good public feedback. There was some cons of the Twitter tweets that we saw, but I guess some of them, some users kind of had to get used to the new facilities. So at the beginning, we saw some minor incidents that happened, but mostly, we saw a lot of good feedback that people really love the bike facility here. And then, yeah, these last slides are just before and after pictures on how Virginia Avenue looked and how it's looking right now, which is great. And I think, yeah, all the green markings are pretty much showing the bike lanes on each side, the conflict areas, the queue lanes that we talked about. So I think, yeah, that's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the great presentation, Othman and Sonali. We'll be taking questions from the attendees. Please feel free to type in your questions in the chat box if you have any. So I haven't seen any questions coming in yet. I do have a couple of questions actually. So I guess what are the elements of considerations or the methods that DDOT is using to prioritize which corridor, I guess, the locations to implement the PBL, the protected bike lanes?
So we have the DC Bike Master Plan, which was done, I think, in 2005, and it's constantly being updated. And we also have the moveDC plan, and so we work a lot with the planning division at DDOT. They basically come up with, they prioritize different corridors, and they have different metrics that they use, and we work with them through the preliminary engineering process, and then we generally take over the projects at 30%, and then we design and build it.
Sounds good. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. The first question is that similar to our 15th Street PBL project that was presented yesterday, will there be automatic bike counters deployed on the Virginia Avenue?
I'm not sure about that. Sorry, go ahead, Sonela.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say there aren't any as of now, but I'm not sure for the future. Maybe Othman, you know more.
I don't know. I think the team that presented the 15th Street bike yesterday, they're probably going to be doing some of those things in different PBL projects around the city, but none from us at the moment.
Sounds great. The next question is, in the level of service table, it appears some LOS values drop from D to E in build conditions during the peak hours, which I believe is not desirable in terms of traffic analysis. Are there any concerns regarding this issue during the planning stage? And how did you justify this drop in the level of service?
So yes, there was some, maybe in a couple areas, obviously we were removing one lane. So most of the corridor had access capacity. There were some parts that we had to make like modifications. But I mean, we still consider the E because we're adding so many different, we're accommodating for so many different modes. The E was still acceptable in our, from our point of view. Even though, I mean, and we also look at the timing, like how much the delays are being added, and it was not enough for us to impede us from doing this project.
Yep. I'd also like to add that we go back to the purpose and need of the project, and there is a whole philosophical debate on whether to follow LOS in these bike and bus projects in the first place. But we generally go back to the purpose and need, and we work with our environmental branch to make sure that our traffic analysis is done well, and that the main decision maker for us is going to be the purpose and need of the projects, which in here was to accommodate safe bicycling throughout the corridor.
All right. So I actually do have a follow-up question regarding that level of service table. So it seems like that was the capacity analysis result, and I was wondering if the interactions between the bike users and cars, particularly within the intersections, like those permissive conflicting movements. I was wondering if those were being considered when the operations impacts are evaluated. or like even like, have you seen any potential concerns regarding the increased potential conflicts upon the implementation, I guess, from the perspective of safety as well as operations?
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, there's going to be more conflict, but that's why we had about 9 intersections that we did signal modifications. We added bike signals. We added different phases for different movements, like the vehicular movements, bike movements, pedestrians, left turns, also left turn phases. So we tried to minimize all these conflicts with signal modifications that we had to do, extensive signal modifications. Not all our projects have like 9 intersections that we have to go and add like bike signals and modifications in general. But this was, yeah, had a lot of signal work involved in it.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you again for the great presentation. And next, moving on, I'd like to welcome our next speakers, which is, bear with me. So we have 2 speakers, Joshua Wolfgram from Mead and Hunt and Megan Coles from JMT. So Joshua Wolfgram is a project engineer in the Mid-Atlantic Traffic Engineering and ITS department at Mead and Hunt. His experience spans traffic signal operations, traffic safety, multimodal analysis and design, and traffic signal design. Some of his significant projects include crafting DDOT's LPI implementation and vertical traffic calming policies, developing and implementing optimized signal timings at DC's 1600 plus intersections, and coordinating and preparing engineering design for DDOT's Quick Build Vision Zero engineering initiative and corridor multimodal designs. Joshua is passionate about incorporating multimodal safety and mobility enhancement into traffic signal projects and developing transportation solutions that promotes safer and better living. Our second presenter is Megan Coles. Megan is a 3rd-year traffic design engineer with JMT. She graduated in 2019 from Syracuse University and has been in DC since after. Megan has been involved in several bike and bus lane projects throughout the city, including the Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast multimodal projects and 9th Street Protected Bike Lanes projects, and the 20th and 21st Protected Bike Lane projects, to name a few. She is passionate about improving the safety for multimodal users throughout the district through the implementation of bike and bus lanes. So with that, Josh and Megan, if you'd like to start your presentation, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. As stated, my name is Megan Coles, and with me today is Josh Wolfgram, and we'll be discussing the Park Place Northwest and Warder Street Northwest one-way protected bike lanes project. Josh, can you hit the next slide? Cool, thank you. JMT and Mead and Hunt were tasked with the design of complementary protected bike lanes along Warder Street and Park Place Northwest, along with the contraflow bike lane on Park Road Northwest, which connected these 2 projects together. These corridors are both located on the border of the Petworth and Parkview neighborhoods in the northwest quadrant of DC. This area is very residential and family friendly with multiple schools, places of worship, and recreation areas. Next slide, please. Hey, Josh, can you hit the next slide? Oh, did we lose you? Excuse me. The completion of these projects added approximately 2 miles of protected bike lanes to the area, which furthered the crosstown bicycle lane network of Northwest DC that began in 2020. This furthered DDOT's mission to be more multimodal friendly and meet its Vision Zero goals. Warder Street and Park Place both added protected one-way bike lanes, with Warder Street running south to north and Park Place running north to south. In order to remain cognizant of all roadway users, several other features were implemented for these two projects, which include tree pits, additional parking, and the narrowing of Park Place, which had several incidences of speeding. We'll be going into more detail about all of those projects in the presentation today. Next slide, please. Working within the confines of the existing roadway cross-section, JMT and Mead and Hunt were tasked with creating innovative solutions to different aspects of the two projects. The first point I'll touch on is the proposed tree pit green infrastructure improvements proposed on both projects. Tree pits were a key feature on Warder Street and were also incorporated on Park Place. The addition of 10 tree pits on Warder Street allowed for a unique system of stormwater collection to curb bump outs, which typically would have been impervious. This added tree canopy to help reach the district's goal of planting 10,000 trees to reach 40% canopy coverage by 2032. This type of design was the first instance, or excuse me, one of the first instances of including tree pits on a bicycle lane project. The tree pits also helped to permanently narrow the road, helping with traffic calming measures on the two corridors. With heavy involvement of the community regarding where the tree pits would be installed, JMT and Mead and Hunt were able to use the solution to better the aesthetics of an area that previously had a limited number of trees. While this project was mainly a bike lanes project, the tree pit design held significant weight in this being a successful project. During the design, the existing drainage was a limiting factor on the project. The drainage in the area was very old and not held with today's standards. This created somewhat of a challenge to ensure the tree pit would properly take in and let out water effectively. The detail on this slide shows what we used on our plans for successful construction. One key feature is the sidewalk reconstruction along the backside of the tree pit. This was vital to give the tree enough space to grow properly. Previous to this project, DDOT had worked closely with the green infrastructure team on the Ivy City project, so many of the details were already complete and only needed minor modifications to be incorporated on both Warder Street and Park Place. Extensive utility research was conducted in order to circumvent and avoid any potential conflicts during construction. This was necessary because the tree pit had to be dug down approximately 6 feet to install all necessary structural soils and allow enough space for the tree to thrive. The detail shows various types of materials needed to maintain the features of the tree pit. Sand-based structural soil was a key component to the design. This material allows stormwater to properly infiltrate the ground underneath while also providing enough structural base for the sidewalk. Geotextile was also used between planting soils and aggregate to ensure the fine soil would not be washed away with the stormwater. All of this ensured successful tree planting while maintaining structural security of the sidewalk and all curb elements. I'll now pass it to Josh, who will discuss the other innovative treatments on both corridors.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And I sincerely apologize. My internet went out just as we got started, so apologies for the blip. I'm going to leave my video off to avoid that again. But the first innovation I wanted to talk about today was the modifications we made to the buffer design along the protected bike lanes themselves. I think Othman and Sonela alluded to this already, but one of the great things about these medium scale projects is the ability to innovate and kind of build off previous designs and always be, providing the best quality product that we can to residents. So one of the ways we did that on this project was by actually using a combination of precast block sizes during the design of the buffer system. So you can see in the foreground here, the large blocks that we placed at the beginning and ends of the segments. This provides the maximum protection for the bike lane as well as the parking. It provides a large footprint, but that can also be problematic when you put it in that narrower buffer space next to the parked cars that people are trying to access, and it provides, or it can inhibit their ability to get into their car. So by using a smaller block where that parking is protected, we can provide better access, reduce construction and maintenance costs for those items that then cost less, and overall just use a more efficient use of resources. We also employed fewer flex posts along the corridor. We still provided a flex post at the beginning of each block, that kind of delineates those concrete blocks that are in the that are on the roadway. But then rather than providing a flex post alternating with every block, we switch then to every other block to still provide some vertical delineation, still provide the protection for the cycle track, or the PBL, but to reduce the number of overall flex posts we were installing along the corridor, just less overall maintenance cost in the long term. And for the residents that sometimes complain about the aesthetics of the flex post, it cuts down on the number of those. So then the second innovative treatment I'll talk about is the expanded sidewalk buffer that we installed along the Park Place corridor and the accompanying in-street ADA features. So I think Megan already mentioned that Park Place was a kind of a road diet project as well, going from 2 vehicular travel lanes to a single vehicular travel lane. So as part of that, we wanted to reduce the overall opportunity for speeding, have space for a buffer, but that still left a little bit of roadway width that we had to work with. And so that was decided to be repurposed as parking. You can see on this photo, on the right side there was the existing parking that provided access to those residences. And then on the left side, we actually then created that new parking space to kind of offset some of the parking that would be lost through the daylighting of crosswalks and any other changes that we made along the corridor. The problem with this, though, is that you can see there's no existing sidewalk on that side of the street because of the old soldier's home, and that's U.S. government property over there. So we didn't even have the ability to expand and add sidewalk. So as part of this project, we expanded that buffer width that was between the PBL and the new parking, kind of creating a pseudo walkway or a sidewalk for pedestrians to access their vehicles safely away from the travel lanes. But then also we created crossing points and added in-street ADA features like detectable warning surfaces that still provided direction to visually impaired pedestrians who might be crossing the street, and then enhance these with in-street crossing signs, side of street crossing signs, and so forth. I'll transition now to talk about some of the complexities of the projects and the add-ons that we made to enhance the project, changes to scope. So the first of these was actually extending the limits of the Park Place corridor by 0.3 miles. The original project terminated in the southbound direction at the existing crosstown cycle track that opened a few years ago, so the top of this image. The then transition point for that was to an unbuffered bike lane that was just painted on the street down on Park Place through this urban freeway interchange connecting to 5th Street down below, which had a protected bike lane. So one thing that came up during the community feedback portion after 65% was, can we extend the project limits, convert that segment to protected bike lane as well, and close that gap in the protected bike lane network? So we worked with DDOT at this point to figure out how we could do that, the best way to transition from one side of the street to the other. The project that we were working on had the bike lane on the east curb to minimize curb cut conflicts with vehicles and so forth. But we had to transition to the other side of the street to connect to the existing facility. So where was the best place to do that? We ran a couple alternatives, ultimately deciding to transition at the existing signalized intersection at the top of the screen, where it intersects with the crosstown cycle track. So transition there, protect the bike lane down through that urban freeway interchange. And you can really see here how we cut down on that available space for drivers to speed through these neighborhoods and added a safe way for bicyclists to connect through that network. And then furthermore, we also worked with DDOT to install a contraflow bike lane on Park Road. Park Road runs in the east and west direction, so kind of connecting these two north-south facilities that we were working on. This was done to provide not only a safe bike connection, but traffic calming along this route, along this road. So before, Park Road ran 2 ways for vehicular traffic and didn't really have dedicated bike facilities. So what we did was convert that to one-way westbound vehicular operations, narrowed that roadway width for drivers, added sharrows as kind of like a neighborhood slow street for bicyclists in the westbound direction, and then added the contraflow lane for bikes in the eastbound direction. So improving safety, improving multimodal options on this street, but providing a two-way connection really between these two facilities so that people could safely access one or the other. And then also leaving open the option to connect to future projects on the west side by Georgia Avenue, allowing for further connections and development of the network. And then as part of that, really, we took an existing safety project that DDOT was already working on at Park Road and Georgia at that western terminus, and incorporated that into the scope of this project, basically taking those elements and putting them in our design to kind of consolidate the recommendations, make sure that they were cohesive with what we were proposing as part of the bike lane project, and then reduce overall implementation and design efforts. And then I'll turn it back to Megan, who's going to cover some of the additions to the Water Street project that really added value.
Thanks, Josh. So yeah, as Josh just said, Water Street also had a few design changes over the course of the project. The first was the closure of the Michigan Ave Northwest slip lane. This was a modification that we encountered a little bit later in the design phase after a community request was brought to the team's attention. DDOT in general is moving towards closing a lot of these slip lanes because they're often dangerous since they prioritize vehicle movement and speed over the pedestrian safety. JMT designed this closure using temporary materials because of the lack of existing drainage features in the area. We wanted to ensure the water movement was still in good shape. So we did this using the Terracast TSP 40 planters shown in the bottom right of the top photo, as well as flexible delineator posts and thermoplastic pavement markings. Another addition that was added was ADA ramp upgrades. These were designed after DDOT had asked us to do a ADA analysis of the corridor. As a result, several ramps were upgraded, including the ones on the floating island at Michigan Ave shown in the top photo, as well as the ramp on Irving Street shown in the bottom photo. Both of these projects had major impacts on the area. The first I'll touch on is the environmental significance. There are several design decisions that held large environmental implications. The addition of tree pits on Water Street and Park Place reduced the impervious pavement, added stormwater collection, and added greenery to an area that didn't have a lot of tree canopy previously. The installation of protected bike lanes on these two corridors narrowed the road, effectively reducing the capacity for single occupancy vehicles and carbon emissions on the two corridors. After completion of the two projects, a more complete network of bicycle lanes was realized in the Parkview and Petworth neighborhoods, allowing safer, easier, and more comfortable travel for users of all ages. This encourages the use of going by bike instead of by vehicle. I'll now pass it back to Josh to discuss the social and community impacts.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so building off that last point about safer bike mobility, really what I want to talk about with the social significance of the project is the impacts to safety along the corridors, not just for bikes, but for pedestrians, for drivers, for residents, anyone living in the area. And improved safety outcomes lead to better quality of life. So that was a huge focus of this project. In the before condition along Park Place in particular, speeding was a huge problem in the before condition. You had two vehicular travel lanes on a road that didn't necessarily need two vehicular travel lanes, especially throughout most of the off-peak periods. You had a downhill grade for much of the corridor that really just led to opportunities for drivers to speed. So we narrowed the travel lanes, the width of the lanes themselves, but also reduced the travel lanes for vehicles from 2 to 1, implemented curb extensions to reduce that width further, kind of created a channeling effect with the parking installed on both sides, creating that vertical delineation that lets drivers feel like they're going too fast and enables them to slow down even further. All of these elements we were incorporating into this project in order to reduce driver speeding along the corridor and make it a safer place for residents. And I think it's really cool now that the project is open to be able to look at RIDIS data for the before condition early 2022, the after condition of just this past 2 months, to see the impact that this project has had. And you can really see it here on this slide, showing speeding in the before condition reduced quite significantly in the after condition throughout the day. So showing that these changes that we made during design and planning of these projects, they're coming to fruition in the field for these residents. And I show here on Park Place because this was the, worst, I would say, in the before condition. It had the more significant problems with speeding and crashes, but certainly these elements were incorporated on Water Street as well. the cross section was narrower to begin with, and it was uphill, so it had some of the less problems than the Park Place had, but still trying to create the a more safe environment for residents to get about. And then, building off that even further, with the community significance of the project, it's really about creating more livable spaces for people and connecting residents to more multimodal transportation options. So expanding that crosstown bicycle network that started a few years ago, you can see the red, the lines here being the existing facilities. You had the existing Kenyon to Irving Street facility opened in 2020 and expanded last year further west on Kenyon Street. You have at the bottom there connecting to the existing 5th Street protected bike lanes. And so these options that we're providing really connect those two facilities and allow for more choices for residents to get about. So not only to local connections like their rec centers, their schools, libraries, places of worship, even just visiting other people in their neighborhoods, but these are providing regional access choices for residents. So they don't have to use a car to get to places like Howard University, just a little bit to the south, but before they had no protected connection. Washington Hospital, even Catholic University to the east, now connected to that crosstown bicycle cycle track running on Irving Street. And so it's all about creating these connected networks that people can use, and they don't have to rely on a car if they don't want to. They can have other choices in transportation. So I'll conclude. I guess there's a common theme here to these past 2 days about everyone showing off the positive tweets they're getting on their projects. I wouldn't go to Twitter for all of my validation, but it is great to see that the residents are really taking these projects and some great pictures, sharing their appreciation and how these projects are impacting their lives. And that's what I think it all comes down to with these types of projects, that you're improving transportation options for people, you're making better connections for them, safer roads. And yeah, so this was a great pair of projects to work on, pair of corridors to work on. We're so thankful to JMT for the ability to partner and for DDOT for the opportunity to work on these projects and all others across the city. With that, I'll open it up, I guess, to any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Megan. Thanks for the great presentation. We have several questions from the attendees. I'm going to go through one by one. So first question is why is the cycle track infrastructure completed for months before being officially opened? I bike along there with many others for months while the new traffic signal set covered up. Then DDOT suddenly blocked off the lanes with barriers and announced that they had never been opened in the first place. Was there anything getting in the way of enabling the signals? Similar thing happened with the MBT extension to Fort Totten. The trail was ready for months and was only officially opened long after bicyclists had ignored the construction tape, blocking a perfectly complete facility.
So I think that one is actually related to the Virginia, but if Othman's still on, we actually had very few signal modifications on our project compared to Virginia Avenue. I don't know if Othman can answer that.
I'm sorry, Othman. I'm not sure if it's just the problem from my side, but I can't. The sounds, it's a bit weird. I'm not sure. Alvaro, do you have any idea what's?
But I think we can send these questions out like similar to yesterday's session, and then we'll get them answered. But I believe just the question related to this presentation was the most recent one on the list here.
All right, yeah, sure, I can move on. So yeah, Othman, feel free to type in your response to the Q&A session as a reply to Hunter's question. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. Have residents that living along Park Avenue praised the reduced amount of speeding and or the noise of cars following the implementation of the road diet?
Yeah, I think this RIDIS data we pulled kind of speaks to the fact that the speed measures or speed reduction measures have been working, and certainly the tweets indicate a lot of positive feedback to these projects. So I think there's definitely been a great response to this work.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions to Josh and Megan? All right, I think we are running up on time. Alvaro, we'll conclude our Q&A session. I'm going to turn it over to Alvaro.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment here to thank all of our presenters today, and then also yesterday as well, just for some great sections, presentations, and also just some great content. So yeah, like Songa mentioned, we'll be sending out those PDHs for everyone who registered. And then also just keep an eye out with your emails. I believe, everyone, the members should have received an email about an upcoming ITE meeting. We're having a technical presentation in person at the VDOT Nova office in Fairfax. It'll be more related to transportation planning and one traffic engineering presentation. So keep an eye out for registration to open pretty soon about that. But yeah, if anything else, if you have any other questions, feel free to email us regarding these sessions, and then any other questions regarding the upcoming ITE meeting, just keep an eye out for the registration to open and email us with any questions regarding that. But yeah, if that, then we'll give everyone 3 minutes back and then, yeah, conclude this meeting.